le leadership de cette session avec Nadia. Merci à Nadia pour être ici et pour tout ce que tu fais à l'université, dans la communauté, dehors de l'université aussi.
Je vais parler parfois en français, mais je vais aussi, la plupart de la conversation de mon part va être en anglais. Mais bienvenue de poser des questions, de discuter en français. Et le plan à l'avenir, c'est de traduire toute la conversation entre les deux langues, anglais et français, et de les sous-titrer aussi, à avoir des transcrits pour que ça soit accessible en français et en anglais aussi. Je m'appelle Nadia Abu-Zahra. Je suis à ce moment la chaire conjointe en études des femmes entre l'Université d'Ottawa et Carleton University. Et c'est un plaisir d'enseigner dans une atmosphère de pédagogie féministe et de discuter toujours un meilleur avenir pour nos universités, nos institutions d'éducation postsecondaire. And it is a pleasure to be doing so in multiple languages. I have the honor of being part of a project called Community Mobilization in Crisis, Mobilisation communautaire en crise. And our website, which we'll find in the chat, is in 4 languages. And the goal is to make accessible in terms of all forms of accessibility, ultimately. It's not at present, but the goal is to make it ultimately accessible in all forms of accessibility and in multiple languages. And so that's in French, that's in English, and as well as Portuguese and Arabic at this moment. And we always welcome the opportunities that arise to have the site fully translated into additional languages as well. And so it's a great pleasure to be at a university that prides itself on being the largest bilingual university, English-French, and hopefully in the future, a university in which we can learn many more languages in addition, and first and foremost, First Nations languages. And it's a mixed privilege to be a professor at the University of Ottawa on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation, the Omami-Winini Nation. And I say it's mixed privilege because on the one hand, it enables many things that are good to happen. And on the other hand, it remains an unresolved injustice that hopefully we will all work toward a more just future. And we can't change the past, but we can acknowledge it and we can change the future. I wanted to maybe just start that off as a way to say that a blue sky university would have a more just future, and can we have one? Can we envision things differently? And there are many people in this quest worldwide who are thinking of these things, and I'll draw upon them as we speak together. But I wanted to start with the here and now among us to think about, where are we right now? So right now we're in our calendar, in the solar calendar, we're in mid-October. And in the academic year, this has a very special meaning at the University of Ottawa, as well as other places. We are just a short time before our reading week, which is kind of about 10 days from now at the moment. And I wonder, how does that make people feel? And I'd like people to compare that with how you were feeling, let's say, in the month of July. And of course, this is a personal activity. I mean, maybe in the month of July, someone was having surgery, or, no need to necessarily share more than you wish to be comfortable sharing. But it does beg the question of, does the academic year have a certain meaning collectively? Do we find that there's a collective atmosphere that you'll find in mid-October, one close to mid-November, one in July, and so on? And so how are people feeling in terms of the collective atmosphere and how you're feeling at the moment? Are you feeling uplifted, inspired, motivated, encouraged, and very excited to keep moving? Or are you feeling other things? Now, I'm happy to start this off and then to pass it around in a circle with each person naming the next person. So I would say I feel at breaking point. I don't encourage this among my colleagues. I will share that this is what I'm doing, but I think it's an unhealthy balance. My working day begins at 3 or 4 a.m. and very often ends at 7 p.m. and that's unsustainable. And I've worked 3 consecutive weekends, and so I'm thinking something is wrong. Something is wrong with how I've pictured things, how I've envisioned things, how I've planned things. But could this be structural as well? And I'm happy to pass on to the next person. I will pass on to Doug, if that's all right.
I have no personal complaints because I'm on my research semester. I've had a pretty heavy time over the summer with coursework and in the winter. So I'm in a little bit of a respite, but I've also had health problems this last year and family problems. So I'm a little bit exhausted for reasons that have nothing to do with the university. So, I'm at a point right now where I'm actually having time to read and write. I don't know. I don't really feel under more pressure than usual, although, I realize that most people are. And, as I say, I'm in a little bit of a special place right now personally. But I do suffer from cynicism a great deal. Well, my career is also winding down. I'm within a couple of years of retirement. And I constantly complain, as Peter will attest, about hypocrisies within the university that I find very disturbing. I could go on at length, but I do recognize that I'm at a little bit of a special place at the moment, but that a lot of my colleagues are under tremendous stress and pain right now. I don't know what else to say, Nadia. Do I pass it on to somebody else? Oh, well, Ruth.
Nadia, I'm a little bit concerned about your current state, getting up that early. I did that for a few months when I was in New Zealand recently, and I know how, and I was alone, and you, I believe, have children, so I feel for you. I'm in a very privileged position. I've just ended 11 years of senior administration in the faculty, and I'm still a bit confused about the ease of a regular professor's life compared to what I did for the last 11 years. So maybe I'm doing something wrong, but I'm in a very privileged position through COVID because we have a nice house, we have a vegetable garden, we've not got young children to care for that are when school closed. So most of my colleagues are in more stressful positions than me at the moment, and I appreciate that. I'm very grateful for that. Yeah. Eduardo, good to see you, Eduardo et Julia.
Oui, moi aussi, je suis contente de voir. Bon, pour ma part, c'est un peu difficile à dire parce que dans le mois de juillet, pendant l'été, j'étais vraiment très stressé parce que d'un côté, je devais présenter ma demande de permanence à la faculté et de l'autre côté, je devais préparer mes cours, les cours que j'allais enseigner en modalité bimodale. Alors, dans la salle de classe et en ligne, puis j'ai aussi un autre cours que j'enseigne en ligne. Et ça fait en sorte que j'étais vraiment très stressé, je sentais beaucoup la pression. Et en plus, ici à la maison, avec mon fils, c'était quand même assez difficile de s'occuper de lui parce que, bon, et même s'il y avait les activités de l'été, c'était, bon, lorsqu'il était ici, c'était du travail, c'était quand même assez, mes journées étaient assez chargées. Et maintenant, je me sens mieux parce que, par exemple, j'ai déjà présenté ma demande de permanence, c'était quand même un dossier assez important. Puis, j'ai vu que le bimodal, c'est finalement moins difficile que je l'avais prévu. Je pense que comme c'est encore quelque chose d'assez particulier. Je pense que je n'aimerais pas répéter l'expérience, mais c'est moins difficile que par rapport comme je l'imaginais. Mais en même temps, comme toi, par exemple, comme tu l'as mentionné, Nadia, et j'ai travaillé 7 jours sur 7. Et si je ne suis pas en train de préparer des lectures, je suis en train de préparer une demande de financement. Je dois présenter une demande de financement, par exemple, le 15, je pense que la date limite, c'est le 15 novembre. Je suis dans une équipe de chercheurs, puis on prépare la demande. J'organise aussi des activités avec d'autres collègues. Alors, c'est toujours comme, même si je me sens mieux que par rapport à comment je me sentais dans l'été, je pense que le stress est toujours là, puis je sens que j'ai pas vraiment des jours de repos ou des jours pour moi. Et que lorsque je le fais, je me sens coupable, en fait. Parce que c'est comme si j'ai négligé ou comme si j'imagine que je suis en train de négliger ou de laisser de côté des choses que je devrais en train de faire. Alors, des fois, je prends un jour ou deux, mais j'arrive pas vraiment à me reposer parce que je pense toujours d'un côté ces sentiments de culpabilité et de l'autre côté, je pense, même si je suis pas assis devant mon ordinateur, dans la tête, je suis en train de réfléchir par rapport à ce que je dois faire. Alors, j'ai l'impression que j'ai pas vraiment des journées de repos. C'est comme ça que je me sens vraiment.
Lauren, if I can pass to you.
Sure. So for me, I think that definitely for most of my summer, it was quite hectic. I was working a full-time job, and it with training and preparation to start this full-time job, it took up most of my time. So I found that to be very, very hectic. And then I think with the fall sort of period, it's been a lot of research and writing. So it's been slightly less hectic. But I do find that with obviously the changing seasons and the reality still of COVID and all of that, being more inside and having less warm. I mean, this past weekend has been unseasonably warm, but with heading into colder weather and that sort of thing, it's just, it's always a challenge to keep in touch with people, especially when everything is still sort of in that vein of uncertainty and everything's still being handled in the distance. So just managing that and kind of working through all of that in the context of academia as well as the social aspect of life.
Perhaps, Julia, you could go now.
In all honesty, I'm not doing great, but my head's above water. I've had some health and mental health challenges these last couple of weeks that I've been handling. I am looking forward to Reading Week, hopefully for some reprieve. I can't say that October has been less laborious than July. Being a student, I was working 3 jobs on top of doing school. So I think they're pretty much equal in terms of the demands on my physical self, my intellectual self, my emotional self. So that's where I'm at. I know it's not very optimistic, but it's the truth. And I will pass it now to Peter.
Thank you, Julia. And we really appreciate everything you're doing at CRECS. And so thank you for that message too. We can talk offline about what's going on for you, okay? So for me, what I've observed, so I can talk about myself, but I want to just observe what I've heard already, which is really intriguing to me, which is that I think, Nadia, you were sort of maybe seeking with that question for some kind of cycle that we might be going through in a university context, whether we're students or professors or administrative support personnel. And what I'm observing from this conversation is there literally is no cycle anymore. There are only microcycles. So basically, it's 24/7 and it's 12 months a year. And funding councils have deadlines because they have more programs. every 2 months, there's some kind of program you can apply for funding. Courses are going all year round. We're on a treadmill all the time, and all there is microcycles of work. Whether it's studying, whether it's working, whether it's applying for grants, whether it's supervising students, it's all microcycles that go 24/7, 12 months a year. And so if you're looking for some reprieve through a reading week, there is no such reprieve. You spend your reading week marking as a professor, and students spend their reading week catching up with their reading. So there is no reprieve from this treadmill that basically we're all on. But it's a treadmill of our own making, which is the problem. I mean, that's the fundamental problem. We are the university, and we're making the treadmill for ourselves. And so this for me is kind of distressing to hear, but it's certainly the way I feel pretty much all year round. And what's interesting for me, if I can express it, is that COVID ought to have slowed this down and disrupted it, but all it's done is it actually increased it. For example, in our faculty, our graduate program in the MEd is booming as a result of COVID. It's a half-price sale for international students. They don't have to come to Canada to study. They can study from wherever they are now. It's half price. And so it's booming, which is fantastic news for our faculty in some ways and terrible news for our faculty in others. It's a contradiction. And COVID didn't slow this down. The university still made $42 million last year in surplus, despite the kind of dire predictions of what COVID was going to do by students not coming physically to campus. They're not. And now we're a call center 24/7 for student inquiries for online learning. So this is the way I currently see the situation for us. I'm being quite frank. But if we were searching for some reprieve from this treadmill that we've created, it's only accelerating. But it's a treadmill of our own making. And we have choices to make on that treadmill. I appreciate Ruth's comment that, Ruth is like finding a reprieve herself from getting out of the administration, going back to regular prof role. And well, that's fantastic. And we need to learn from that, Ruth, about what it is that you're doing to find the space where you feel like you're actually a coherent, normal, breathing, healthy individual, because it doesn't feel that way for many of us currently. But it's a factory and a fabric of our own making. We have choices to make ourselves. So I'll stop there.
Okay, now I really have something to say. You gave me enough conversation. Okay, COVID makes you squirrely. There's no doubt about that. Peter, I think you're absolutely right. If we're on a treadmill, it is of our own making, okay? We don't have to do everything all the time, all at once. That's a disposition in the world. A reprieve for me is finding space to read. And if I'm not reading, my mind isn't going, I don't want to say forward and make it sound so progressive, okay? But it isn't doing anything other than, looking at daily events, which is not healthy for me. I find I've been teaching Zoom courses. I find they've been fine. Students, I find remarkably, especially as we're trying to move, opening their ideas, both toward anti-racism and Indigenous perspectives, the pushback that I experienced 3 years ago from this is not my problem, I'm not seeing it at all. And I find that deeply encouraging. I also find students, depending on how these classes get set up, very willing to share, to engage, to talk, to work in breakout groups, etc. So I don't feel that doom and gloom. The larger university project, I stopped doing administration for a reason, okay? Because I don't like that space. That's a political space. That's a financial space. We're making bad choices for bad reasons for more money space. That makes me personally ill, okay? So I'm out of that, which is probably why I'm not in tears. I do the ethics committee. That's a good space because those are interesting conversations with colleagues. So, working on choosing your committees, choosing what you're going to apply for. I think we need to look for ways to break that cycle. And of course, my dog is certainly one of I'm sitting in Montreal, where I've been forever. Okay. This is where my home is, although I have an apartment, which is costing me a fortune in Ottawa in the event that I'm ever going to go back there. But I've kept it. Anyway, so I don't feel, I feel a little squirrely. The days are kind of odd, but I don't feel bleak. Where I do feel bleak, and I'm going to pull out of a course if I can't buy out or something, I will not teach a bimodal course. That strikes me as mentally exhausting. Okay. You're in person, all masked, which is not really in person. It's kind of crappy in person. And you've got to worry about your online audience as well. I'm not that good a juggler. So if I can't have, and I see the B.Ed courses for second year are on campus next term, which I think means this bimodal thing. And I think it's a stupid model. So that's a place. But once I get that, either, as I say, I'll buy it out or something. Once I get rid of it, I'll be more comfortable. Okay, enough ranting from me. Good to join you, even if it's late.
If it's okay, I can, on your behalf, Barbara, pass the baton to Jean-Marc.
I'm grabbing the baton. Can you hear me? Yes? Okay. Well, my perspective is a little different because I'm a support staff. I also feel that because of COVID, I'm stuck in the middle of something that is way bigger than I am. It's really weird. I had experiences with new administrative procedures that were implemented during COVID, stuff that were started before COVID. For instance, everything that is related to procurements. I don't know if you heard that. It's a scary word. It's very, very challenging. A lot of things that doesn't really make sense. So that's the kind of challenges that I have. I also had a few health issues that I have to manage at the same time. So everything is happening at the same time. And just to give you an example, what I mean by stuck in the middle of something that's way bigger, for instance, at FSS, we had to provide 3 days of availability on campus. And I understand, the goal, but for some employee who don't really have direct contact with the public, it can be weird sometimes. I was disappointed as an employee because there were a lot of things that I liked about telework, working from home. And before COVID, I remember that hearing all the unions requesting the possibility to do that, and it was always refused. But out of a sudden, COVID broke out, and now it was okay. So you were allowed to work from home. So then that kind of things. But in the same time, I also observe what I call a COVID fatigue on the administrative structure. I see that there's a very important roulement personnel, people that are leaving the campus. So this is also something, in happening. And I think that that's something that I feel. Je sens qu'il y a comme une fatigue des gens qui tombent malades. Je le vois des collègues qui prennent des congés de maladie prolongés, des trucs comme ça. Donc, j'ai comme l'impression que la structure, même si on est en train de revenir en présentiel, c'est encore un petit peu fragile. Je vais m'arrêter ici. Je ne sais pas qui n'a pas eu la chance de parler. Peut-être que je vais vous laisser, Nadia, déterminer.
C'est tout le monde qui ont parlé. Et merci beaucoup pour le partage. C'est beaucoup. C'est très, très apprécié. I'll flip back into English, but I'm happy to flip back and forth. And as I said, the long-term goal is to have this translated into more than one language. And I think the reason I asked this question was to bounce it back into our hands and to think, okay, so are there structures that lead us into perhaps paths we're not as comfortable in? And can those structures be changed? And I think a groundbreaking book in this regard was The Slow Professor. It became this kind of bestseller among professors. I don't know to what extent it became a bestseller among students, but among professors, this was it. It was the book to read. And it was very powerful, and it indeed instilled a change in many individuals, as well as hopefully many departments who took the entire message of it on board as a collective. And unions decided they would give presentations about this book. So I think it was a game changer. But where is that game changer for our pedagogy? Where is that game changer for staff, for students, for all of the other elements of our communities in post-secondary educational institutions? And I'm wondering, can we do, as we did with The Slow Professor, something to change more than just our individual choices as professors, and think more about our perhaps also individual choices as professors, but things that don't only affect us? So instead of only the culture of being able to draw boundaries and to say no and to hopefully live more balanced lives as professors, can we do that as well in what we ask of our colleagues, of staff, of students? And can more than only the professors be in these decision-making roles to be able to make changes in the future? So that's the larger picture and the wonder, the question behind Blue Sky University. What changes can we do that we don't necessarily require to come from the highest echelons of post-secondary educational institutions and the networks that represent those institutions? Can we make these changes to also benefit people who have less of decision-making power, people who are recipients rather than grantors of scholarships, and so on? And that's the question I thought maybe could engage us. And I see Doug already has a hand up.
Well, my hobby horse, as my colleagues will probably tell you, well, I don't know if they pay attention to me or not, but my hobby horse is what I think of as an obsessive concern with university rankings, which to me corrupts the entire system. It means that we, as individual profs, are put under tremendous pressure to publish whatever the hell we can, even if it's, we are only half thinking through things, even if we don't have complete data sets, and we can see this within the entire, at least within my field. I see many people inventing concepts that are just basically old wine in new bottles. They repeat themselves continually. It seems like the in my area, the biggest names are the profs and researchers who are able to churn out the same stuff over and over and over again, or get into ridiculous sandcastles of rhetoric. This means that everyone following these big names, these stars within academia, get the point that this is what success means. Half thinking through things, not investigating things properly, and this all goes into the rewards that our university gets, financially, by attracting people who can get these things easily. So it's Peter's point, right? So we have a tremendous explosion of applicants at the graduate level, certainly in the education faculty, and I think that the level of pedagogy, the learning that's going on within these online environments is inferior. But people get their pieces of paper at the end of it all. It seems like, to me, the whole system has been corrupted by this neoliberal attempt to churn out and produce more and more garbage, basically. I mean, it's I'm at the end of my profession, so I'm not under the kind of pressure that junior faculty are, but I would hate to be an assistant professor right now, to be honest with you, because I see all these different hypocrisies going on within our institution.
There was a long time where I was concerned that this was the only model. As someone who went to universities that primarily followed the similar model, and I say primarily because they did differ in some respects, I started to wonder, has anyone out there done this differently? Has anyone out there been thinking about doing it differently? And I was very pleasantly surprised to find out that, in fact, there are very many successful models of doing things differently, just not ones that I happen to be familiar with, nor ones that were promoted. And so I can share some of those almost as a taster. This is not a fully in-depth meal. These are just very small samples, some tiny appetizers, to say that there is more out there, and that it would be wonderful to begin a series of conversations that, let's think of today as a beginning rather than as a conclusion, to know that there is a blue sky, and maybe not all in one place, but that there are examples out there of things that do things differently, that have different priorities, that seem to be working quite well. And there are also ones that are going completely and utterly bankrupt, particularly with COVID. But that doesn't erase the success that they've met in terms of the lives that they've changed. And so this is where I think maybe we can draw inspiration. So there is a movement finally reaching post-secondary education called ungrading. And that's only the kind of first step, but to move away from grades and examinations and notion of content that needs to be transmitted. And interestingly, because we are going digital after COVID, the movement is called critical digital pedagogy. And there is, a fair bit out there. There's a large community that stretches from Cairo to Berlin to Washington and beyond. And it's interesting because it comes out of literature on child education, infant education, that says, don't provide perverse incentives. Don't say, I'll let you use my phone for 2 minutes if you brush your teeth. Instead, the literature on child development is, why don't you brush your teeth so that you can have healthy practices for the rest of your life and clean white teeth for as long as you wish to have them. And we do the same with grades. We want you to do these readings because they'll be on the exam, and we want you to write the exam and do well on the exam because we want you to have a good grade, and a good grade is essential for your scholarship, and a scholarship is essential for your rent. And so the argument continues and is advocated not only by professors, but also by students who are now in a position to have to demand grades in their courses because they require them for prerequisites for daily life. And yet the movement and all of the literature that's done the research on this says actually they are contradictory to learning. Not only do they keep you at a standstill, but they take you backwards. They make you fearful of trying new things, fearful of change, fearful of self-reflection, and so on and so forth. But that's only a tiny morsel of the future that we could see. There's a lot more. There are increasingly programs entitled land-based learning that are very inspiring. There's Deshinta that has been operating for several years and has numerous publications, spelled DECHINTA. There are land-based learning programs in more than one place as well. There are Indigenous-led programs such as, that Deshinta is one, but there are others that are Francophone, one that no longer exists and one that continues to exist. And in addition to those elements of inspiration, there's something called Walls to Bridges, which embraces a completely, I would think of as a different pedagogy, where a significant number of people in the course are within prison walls, which is where the word walls comes from, and a significant number are not within the prison, and they have class together, But class is not lectures and examinations and debates. It's much more of a circular style that we engaged in a moment ago. And it's practiced at the University of Ottawa. Wilfrid Laurier is a leader on Turtle Island in doing this program. And there are many other universities that practice walls to bridges. And these are just some examples of ways in which our pedagogies, not only as professors, what we think we can change in terms of being able to push back on the pressures, but also in the ways that we can, as students, as professors, as staff, can change our environment and our expectations of one another and what becomes important. And we very often heard about rankings as being important. One of the rare and important surveys that's done in terms of rankings is called the Student Satisfaction Survey. It comes out of the United States, and it is, however, done in Canadian universities. And it's a very different picture that emerges from the Student Satisfaction Survey than what emerges from rankings on the basis of research grant funding that's been awarded to various universities. So most of the time, our rankings that we choose to use are based on research grant funding. And to what detriment? Because if you look in contradiction to this at the rankings by student satisfaction, you do in fact see a very different picture. And you start to see universities come to the top that most of the time we don't hear about. Quest University, and significantly for the University of Ottawa, St. Paul University. We should understand what's happening between two institutions founded by the same founders, running in very much parallel, utilizing the same student cards and library, student emails, and so on. So much in common, and yet a profound difference in student satisfaction. What is causing that? Why aren't we asking those kinds of questions? And so I've spoken a lot. I've put out a lot of, tasters, if you like. Those who are American or have familiarity with the American post-secondary educational setup have heard of liberal arts colleges. What are these? What do they do? Well, one of their features is that they don't necessarily focus in on a particular content set initially. Some do, but many don't. And instead, what they're aiming to encourage is a community. So many of these have at the heart a sense of building community first, and then it's up to the members of the community to explore together, to engage in exploration and learning as curiosity-based and curiosity-led. How different is that than 101? I don't know how large your various 101 classes are as students or as professors, but the ones that I know of can be 300, 400. I was once invited to one where the professor said to me, "I'd like to invite you to come speak with 470 of my closest friends," which I thought was rather amusing, because the whole idea is, how can one be close with 470 people? And this is, there are many arguments in favor of large courses. And I don't, as someone who is engaged in trying to advance open educational resources, I'm not one to say that we should not be large communities. But if we want to truly build communities that are sustaining for us as professors, for us as students and as staff, and all others who are part of our university communities, how can we best do so? And is the 101, is that our way to do so? So I just wanted to, I suppose, share with you some ideas that have been circling in my own mind, and not going much further, about how we could re-envision our communities. And perhaps this is idealistic, hence the name Blue Sky. And I give credit to Shannon Labelle, who is a researcher in the midst of completing her master's degree at St. Paul University, who came up with the term Blue Sky University. But maybe that idealism is what's needed. I mean, some people discounted the slow professor as an idealism, but many people adopted it and made it reality. And maybe that's what we need for the Blue Sky University. And what are the consequences if we don't? Well, it's it's easy to think of the consequences on us, but I think it's also important to think of the consequences. I don't know about you, but I receive on average 1 email a day from someone who is outside of Turtle Island, wishing to study at the University of Ottawa and seeking my support as an individual for their application, which signifies to me that at the moment we're a near fortress. There are that many people wishing to come, willing to pay the fees, but facing so many obstacles that it's likely I may never see any of these people face to face. So what is happening that's creating this fortress? And how could perhaps a shift to land-based learning, community-based learning, project-based learning, how could that shift open the doors for so many people who otherwise would be restricted? How could we think of our campus as being in more than one place and being able to build community in more than one place? That's an open question. I've asked a lot of open questions and given a lot of food for thought. I want to give one more example because it was shared publicly on radio, and I came across it in a different way. So the example is that, and it was given on CBC, but the example is that of the medical program at McMaster University. And I came across it because of a children's birthday party and speaking to the other parents, 3 of whom are professors at the University of Ottawa, and who went through this very interesting project-based learning that was founded in 1969 at McMaster University. People sing its praises. Its graduates continue to attribute to it many of their accomplishments that they later achieved as medical professionals in emergencies like COVID, in emergencies like the I don't know what to call it, but the addiction issue with opioids. I think people have called it perhaps an epidemic. I don't know the word that's been used for the opioid crisis, but no one can say it wasn't a crisis. And the professionals dealing with this at the moment, to this day, say that the program that we followed and the problem-based learning that we followed was something that we carry with us. And they noted to me personally, we weren't graded. We received feedback. We wanted to learn. We wanted to make mistakes in order to learn lifelong learnings from those mistakes. So it's a different atmosphere. It's a different set of pressures, but it's based on relations. And this is where I speak as a settler on Turtle Island. I'm not Indigenous to Turtle Island, but I think that there is something very important for post-secondary education to be learning from Indigenous pedagogies and Indigenous ways of knowing, being, and doing, and that is relational accountability. It is written about as having been something that's overused by settlers, but at the same time, it is, and acknowledging those very important critiques and hoping to address them, it is crucial that we move past the rankings on bases that don't respond to our needs, that we move past the pressures on bases that don't respond to our needs, and to think much more about relational accountability. Think of all of those essays. I don't know if you as fellow professors or if you as students have treasured essays that you thought were brilliant, that are destined only at the very most for our filing cabinets. Your personal filing cabinet as a student or your personal filing cabinet as a professor. One university, Carleton University, started saying, well, let's encourage some experiential learning just so we don't have throwaway work. This generation who's coming in as students, whether they're coming in at the age of 60 or whether they're coming in at the age of 19, they're coming in with so much to offer. And yet we, unfortunately, instead of centering relational accountability and who they can offer it to and creating these networks and these connections, we're discarding those. They are simply a route to learning, but there's not that relational accountability. And how much more could we be and could we do with the relational accountability? And again, there are so many positive examples. I'd like to bring one again from the University of Ottawa, the work of Hanan Anis and her colleagues, Stephen Day is among them, but also the student leaders who have really led this one, Midya Hassan and others, who when they decided that they wanted to talk about engineering challenges, they thought, well, why are we doing hypothetical engineering challenges? And they talked about creating prosthetics for countries with which Hanan has direct connections, and was able to export not only the results of these prosthetics for people who are missing limbs and would like to use them, but the 3D printers so that they themselves can design their own prosthetics. I mean, it's a very, I haven't given justice to any of these programs, to the Walls to Bridges program, to the work of Hanan Anis and the many initiatives that she leads, among others, and are supported by community members. Richard Abbé is a supporter of note. I've only touched the surface of many initiatives, including the ones of which I'm a part, like community mobilization in crisis. But it's enough to know we could do things differently. If we were not bound to an exam period that creates stress, to a midterm examination period that creates stress, these kinds of artificial cycles that, as has been well pointed out, have turned into a nonstop 24/7, 12-month cycle, we could do so much more. So I share that with you. We've completely run out of time, and therefore it is a taster moment. But I invite a few of you, if you wish, in the last 4 minutes to close up. If you need to leave, I completely understand.
We have a couple of new people who joined, and so maybe they would like to just provide some insight. Basically, what we've been trying to do throughout the session, if I'm to paraphrase, is to dream up a different way of being in higher education that is much more inspiring, that actually provides energy and creativity and imagination and all the great things that when we have truly been learning and growing as people, that we felt in our lives in different places and different experiences. I don't know, Nadia, if that captures what you're talking about, but for me it does. And that then connects us to each other, and more profoundly to each other in the diversity in which we find ourselves with others who are different than us in some fashion, and that provide connections and some kind of mutual exchange and reciprocity that we can learn and grow from. That for me is, in a factory is very difficult to achieve, because a factory is about standardizing and producing the same product time after time. And this is antithetical, I think, to exactly what you've been proposing. It's difficult in a place where the business model is to continually grow enrollment, because it's the only place where revenue comes from. And so the factory just becomes bigger. And yet it doesn't make any more money. It just requires the workers to work harder. And this is just a very distressing business model that we need to break and find a new way through. Anyways, I'll stop there and ask the two new parts. If you feel like speaking, please feel free to step forward. Okay.
Kokab, I'll put you on the spot, and then I'll move to Kothar. The question is, is there something you wanted to comment on? How have your experiences been? If I may add, I know both personally, and I'm grateful that you're here with us. Kokab is an assistant professor of psychology in Yemen, and is currently in Ottawa, and has been for several years, and launching a telemental health network in order to deliver mental health services in Yemen while being in Canada. And so this is the forefront of where to move if we wish to be thinking internationally, transnationally, and inclusively, multilingually, using technology in ways that do not demean us, but rather uplift us. So, Kokab, if there's anything you wanted to add about what a post-secondary educational institution, a university, could learn from the kind of work you're doing at the moment, it would be really helpful.
I'm sorry. Thank you so much. And it is my pleasure to be here and to participate in this wonderful conversations. I'm sorry to join in late because I had a Zoom meeting, and also I'm preparing for the training workshops that we will soon deliver it to the mental health workers in Yemen. It is the collaboration work between the ACT International Organization in the United Kingdom, and also between my initiative, Bridges to Peace and Solidarity, and our partners in the ground, what is most of them mental health center, and also civil society organizations. Yes, I'm glad to be here and to be a member of Human Rights Research and Education Center that helped me to build a wonderful networking with Nadia, Dr. John Becker, and many professors at the University of Ottawa. And I think through the mobilizing community in crisis, we can deliver a good model how to transfer the knowledge from the west to east, from this beautiful country, from peaceful country, to help people in conflict zone. And I'm dreaming and just to build a platform that will be easier for you as a professor in the University of Ottawa or another universities in the North America or Europe to transfer this humanity or human information to the human in the conflict zone, because we need this knowledge. We need to build the capacity for the people in mental health, people in conflict zone, not just in the mental health, in the different areas. And I'm glad that I start to work with Nadia Abu-Zahra, and I become a member of the community mobilizing communities in crisis team. And that I think this is the first step to build a wonderful networking and a wonderful work to transfer this knowledge, because really people and war victims in the conflict zone need this knowledge to be transferred to them. And thank you so much. This is what I can to add. And thank you Nadia, thank you Peter, thank you so much to having me in this wonderful event. Thank you.
And thank you, Professor Al-Wada'i, who joined a course that was offered in the School of International Development and Global Studies, who personally undertook to mentor 6 graduate and 1 undergraduate students and linked them. They were inspired, some of them, to change the topics of their master's theses to adjust to what they had learned from COCAB. It's a magnificent partnership, and I hope that it continues. I wonder, Kothar, if I may ask if you just wanted to briefly introduce yourself, say a few quick words. It's wonderful for us to be able to get to know you.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be with you today, and sorry for late. Actually, my name is Kauthar Khouli Ramadan. I'm now currently the Executive Director of Women for Justice Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization established in Toronto in 2019. With this organization, I continue my work was established in 2011 after Arab Spring in Egypt. So we established some projects and activities related to human rights and women's rights, especially the intersection between religion and gender issue. As you know, in Middle East and especially in Egypt, the culture and religion approach is a very important aspect to determine how people dealing with the women's rights issue. But because the dictatorship in Egypt and the coup, which happened in 2013, our work freezed, and no public sphere. It's a closed public sphere for journalists, for human rights and women's rights and civil society activists. So in 2017, I moved to Canada to start over from the scratch or continue my work. In 2017, actually, I was very confused and traumatized because what happened, because there are many details. Maybe not today, I can tell you about it. But I moved to Canada with my family to protect my family. Then I was lucky because after 6 months, I found a job in one of non-profit organization in Oakville in GTA. After 2 years, we starting with pandemic, I start my own organization, which is Women for Justice Foundation, to continue my interest related with gender and religion from as one of our paths, our strategy to work. As well, we have a network related to MENA region, women rights activists and women rights defenders who works in conflict zones, because I am a member of several alliance and coalition related to women rights and women peace builders. So I continue my work in MENA region and globally, and sometimes I run some program within the diaspora community in Canada. This is a brief of what I am doing now, and I'm happy to see you, Dr. Nadia, and to see you, Kaukab, and see you all. And yes, that's all. Thanks.
And I'm very happy. I'm very grateful. And if the future university plays a role as convener of community, then we can learn from one another. We have a university that offers programs in conflict studies and in development studies and opportunities to travel. And yet right here, right beside the university, are extraordinary individuals who are rarely inside the university. You know, beside, but not inside. And I think that's something we want to be thinking about. We want to rethink, what is the purpose of a university? Is the purpose of a university to offer degrees, to be a factory? The word that kept coming up to me as I kept reading critiques of the neoliberal university, because there are many out there. You know, if I wanted to give you an academic presentation with a bibliography 9 pages long, single-spaced, 12-point font, Times New Roman, I could easily do so. There are many critiques of the neoliberal university. And the word that comes up to me every time I read them is the word flatten, to kind of narrow each incredible, colorful, bright, multifaceted individual and all of their connections and relations into a two-dimensional kind of no color at all being that is not natural nor comfortable. And I see people interested in the cynical bibliography. I have it. Yes, I do. All of the things about universities built on slavery, built on colonialism, built on dispossession, the precaritization of labor, mental health consequences of this flattening of individuals, but why do we flatten? They have to all fit within the narrow slot within the factory. And we have to, if they come in different, we have to flatten them, produce them, and they have to all come out the same. That's the feeling that I get when I read this literature. Perhaps that's my own bizarre imagination, but that's what I read between the lines. And that's a painful process. It has very negative mental health consequences. It has a negative effect on everyone because it's not our natural way of being. And our natural way of being is to celebrate the many different things that we each bring, rather than saying, you need to pass your transcript through this location. No, you're not eligible for this. You're beyond a certain age. You're no longer eligible for this, and so on. So how can we be celebrating and building community and welcoming change and welcoming difference and welcoming the different languages, and all of this, rather than the flattening that we feel to experience? These are questions I haven't come with direct answers, but I wanted to share this with you in the same way where people share working papers. I wanted to share this with you to say, I'm at the beginning of this. My doctorate is in geography. It's not in education. Not that I didn't apply. I had aspirations. Nearly, but there was no scholarship attached. So it had to be another discipline before I could get into education. Doug, let me give you a few moments.
Oh, no, I've got to go, of course. Pressure's on to join another faculty assembly. But I wanted to thank you so much, and everyone else who's here, to the optimism and the positivity. As I mentioned in the chat, I have to really combat my own tendency towards the debilitating cynicism, and long story there. But I wanted to thank you so very much. I am interested in that bibliography, but I am, of course, more interested in all the positive stuff that you're mentioning in this session. So thank you. I hope in some manner this can continue, of course. And thanks, Peter, for organizing. This is really great stuff. Thank you.
And I'm very happy to share. I'm happy to share on an ongoing basis. I will leave the closing words to Peter, and if she's still here, I think Julia's no longer here. So I'll leave the closing words to Peter. But thank you all for joining. It's nice not to be running in circles in my own mind, and to be in circles in community with all of you. So thank you very much.
Merci to them all. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I don't want to draw this out, but I do want to recognize how great it was to hear everybody's voices in this conversation, and not just the voice of one presenter. It's a nice model for future colloquia, Nadia. So merci pour cette innovation. And you really pointed out, well, first of all, you've connected us now, more than you, us to two amazing community activists here. And I'm super excited to see what we can continue in the relationship between the university, your initiatives, Nadia, and CMIC, and the Center for Research on Educational and Community Services. So please let us not stop the conversation at this point. I'm most grateful for Marlene to be here too, who's an amazing support to professors in trying to put together proposals to raise funds to actually get engaged with community groups, to actually do work that breaks down the barriers between the university and community movements and community organizations. And Marlene, so thanks for this. I hope this has been refreshing for you, but also know how much we respect what you do to help us try to find resources to do this work. And to everyone else who was here, thank you again for participating. We look forward to a future conversation. There's much we can do. The university is us, and the university can be us beyond what we think the university is. And you've given us a lot to think about today, so thank you.